I'm making a video game. I decided to start a devlog for a few reasons. First, as a reminder to myself of where I've been and what I've done and how much I've improved on this journey. Second, I've been enjoying watching other devlogs and I've learned a few things I didn't know. So I hope to be able to do that for other aspiring game devs by just talking through the problems I've encountered and how I've solved them. Lastly, I hope this will get me into a consistent schedule and keep my motivation high. I tend to get distracted from side project to side project, so let's see if this will help me finish the game out. Let's talk about why. I wanted to learn what it takes to make a video game. I've never done this before and it seemed like an interesting challenge. So, what am I making? Well, I think as a rite of passage, I need to start with an open world, massively multiplayer online, science-based, 100% raccoon role-playing game, an MMORPG, which is going to end up in a few ways. 1. I work on the game for a few years and make something mediocre at best. 2. I work on the game for a few years and give up. 3. I end up making a Kickstarter asking for way too little money to make a game I definitely did not have the skills to make. So, with all that introspection, let's discard that idea and instead go with something a bit more traditional. A 2D side-scroller with a twist. Original, I know. But we all have to start somewhere, and this feels accomplishable and small enough. I will have to worry about potential scope creep by thinking of cool mechanics that may work for the game and try to add them in. With that out of the way, let's talk about the game. The game is somehow unintentionally based off of the board game Deep Sea Adventure, which has the following mechanics. The objective of the game is to acquire the most points. You get points by collecting treasures. There are multiple players, each with their own diver. There's a submarine, which is both the start and stop point of the journey. The treasures are lined up from least to highest value. There is a limited amount of moves you can make based on the oxygen level. The oxygen is shared by everyone. The players take turns rolling a dice to move. When they land on a treasure, they can decide to pick it up or not. Picking up a treasure slows you down. This mechanic is implemented by decreasing the number of treasures you have from the dice roll. Once a player picks up a treasure, every time their turn starts, they start to consume oxygen from the shared pool equal to the number of treasures they are currently carrying. So your objective each round is to get some amount of treasure without drowning. The game is loads of fun. So, what I'm making is essentially a 2D scroller with a time limit, underwater themed, with some platforming aspects to it, but you have freedom in both the X and Y directions. Yes, I know what you're thinking. This doesn't sound fun at all. Well, let's talk a bit about why underwater levels traditionally suck. 1. They're slow. 2. You have to constantly balance oxygen. 3. They completely remove the momentum aspect of platformers. If we think of good water levels, they usually give the player a new mechanic which negates the slow movement. Trust me, I was originally going to use slow movement as a mechanic. Fortunately, one of my game dev friends helped me refine movement so it doesn't suck. These are some of the early gifts of the movement during the prototyping phase, but with the pointers from my friend, it doesn't feel sluggish when moving. So, here's the mechanics I'm going with. You can move sideways while on the ground. You can also jump by pressing spacebar. Jumping from the ground gives you a quicker velocity. You can swim up by holding spacebar and you'll continue swimming up. Once you let go of spacebar, you fall down like a rock. You can use shift to do things faster while consuming more oxygen. Carrying a treasure slows you down. This sort of combines the mechanic of Flappy Bird with other platformers. However, my platforms aren't designed around timing a jump because the swim mechanic lets you get anywhere, so I'll have to get creative with this level of freedom and try to force the player into controlling when to swim up, when to fall down, and how to use their gain momentum to traverse through the levels. I'm also combining the health and time system into one pool, the oxygen meter. I thought this was an original twist, but I think once again Mario has beat me to it. But I'm fine with this. The last mechanic at the moment is that you have to bring the treasure back to the original point. just like in Deep Sea Adventure, which means the level design has to account for two-way movement to the chest and back, and I think this will give me some freedom to make traversing the level from a certain direction easier and harder. So now, let's get to the name. The original idea came from a pun-based title called Aw Shucks, where you were platforming underwater and all the traps, enemies, were bivalves, or things you can shuck. However, after mulling around with some other names, I decided to give it a name that highlights the point of the game, Don't Drown. That has some nice alliteration and it feels reminiscent of Don't Starve. Since this is the first entry of the series, I'll talk about how I got started. My background is in software engineering, so I didn't need to learn programming concepts, but I did need to learn which tools to use. I decided to pick Unity since the Unreal Engine 5 version did not have a 2D template, and after following a 2D tutorial for Unreal, it felt like overkill. I then followed a Unity 2D platformer tutorial with Pandemonium to learn the basics. After that, I got started, opened up Unity, and created a new project. Since the tutorial I followed started with character movement and walls, I started there too. I went to the Unity Asset Store and grabbed this free astronaut asset. It also had animations, so it let me do animations from the start just to feel slightly better when prototyping. I also found this underwater demo with some assets that fit the theme. I then decided to try my hand at making 3 different enemies. A clam, which is reminiscent of the fire trap from the Pandemonium tutorial, a jellyfish, which is similar to a moving platform. You can stand on top, but not touch the tendrils. I still have to work on the player standing and moving with the jellyfish when it is horizontally moving. A shark that patrols an area. It attacks you if it sees you at a certain range, and it'll continue attacking you until it reaches the end of the patrol point. It then goes back to the patrol start, ignoring attacking you. I also made a basic naval mine trap, which I also fiddled with a physics-based one that can fall down and roll around. I may or may not use it, but I learned something when doing it. I then got on to making what I call an interaction zoo, which is basically a scene where I'm just dumping everything, dragging blocks and shapes to try to flesh out things I like and things I don't. I ended up making a fun vertical style maze which I wanted to use in the game. I also made a block out for the first level, the original version. I played it and I realized a couple of things. It was not linear, so it wasn't clear where you needed to go next. There were zones that didn't make sense or you could completely bypass by going through the top. So I scrapped that and took some inspiration from a few clips from other 2D games and made a new block out for the first level. It is much more linear, though it still has an area that leads you around to a different zone. I then played around in it a bunch, getting the flow of it and making sure the character could squeeze through certain areas and traps. Then I got to doing some art. I made the naval mine first. Then I worked on a variety of treasure chests. After that, I tried my hand at animation and made some chains animate on the naval mines. Then I tried my hand at making the game character and tried to animate it, which got tricky because I've never animated a humanoid. So then I reworked the character to be a bit more cartoonish. The character became larger than my prototype, so I had to go and rework all the spacing between traps for the first level. Then, I made some tiles and replaced the block out with tiles. I then realized I needed diagonal tiles, so I made those too. I then filled out the block out with the tiles I had made. I added collisions to the outline tiles, added filler tiles just to round out the level. Then I made water-looking tiles that would transition between colors. My original idea was to make a cutscene before each level where the player drops and the colors change as they're diving down. But then I decided to try to apply that to the level instead of just the cutscene, and I used the water tiles to give sort of depth to it. Things get darker as you go down. I think I could probably do this with lighting, but we'll find out. And here's a quick run through the level. Don't mind the second chest, I was just playing around with things. But playtesting this has led me to realize one glaring thing at the moment. The level is linear, but it doesn't feel like we're using the freedom of movement much. So what I'm planning to do next is test the following mechanics. What if there were multiple chests you could pick up, and there's a scoring system, maybe bronze, silver, and gold. I do have all of these chest variations. Then I'll have to have another interaction with the anchor, which is our exit point for actually deciding when to leave. Other questions. Would holding multiple chests at once, or juggling them by throwing them, be a fun mechanic instead? Granted, that would also lead to more movement penalty, and at that point it just feels like I'm implementing Deep Sea Adventure, but in video game form. So until next time, thanks for watching.